Hey there. Today, the top 5 biggest mistakes people make when trying to sell their small business.
I'm David C. Barnett, and you're tuned in to Small Business and Deal Making, the podcast, YouTube channel, and blog where I talk about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses while controlling risk. So, if you're looking to take control of your future through buying a business one day, or if you already own a business and you're looking to grow or exit, you've come to the right place. I talk about interesting things, I talk to interesting people, and I answer your questions every week right here. So, be sure to hit like and be sure to hit subscribe, and let's get to it.
Are you a small business owner that's thinking about exiting your business now or in the next few years? My team and I are here to help with our unique zero commission program that we've been using since 2016. We can show you what your business is worth, prepare the package you'll need before you meet your first buyer, even run a confidential online advertising program for you just like business brokers do. And we'll coach you through the whole process, or you can hire us to manage it all for you, including coordinating your whole sell side deal team. Head over to howtosellmyownbusiness.com to learn about how my team and I can help you get ready by watching a series of videos we prepared that explain each step in detail. And if you're ready or just curious to learn more, reach out to us and we'll get you started or schedule a call to answer your questions. I look forward to meeting you and learning more about your business. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the top 5 biggest mistakes people make when trying to sell their small business. And we're going to do it in countdown style, of course. And let's kick things off, right? What is number 5? So the number 5 biggest mistake people make when trying to sell a business is neglecting their financial records. So what why would I bring this up as the first thing on the list, and what am I talking about? Well, basically, the surface level issue that immediately kills credibility with buyers and their lenders in particular and their other advisors is when your books are not in good order. Um, or you don't have a demonstrable track record of profitability in things like your tax returns and your financial statements. So, basically, if it's a poor or incomplete picture of what's going on in the business, it communicates chaos, risk, and questions whether or not you're really profitable. The buyer can often be swayed with stories of why your business is good, and you can put things in there like ad backs saying, "Oh yeah, we spend 20,000 a year on, personal travel," which is in there, and you won't have to spend that money. But the reality is that the buyer is just the first person that has to be convinced and impressed with these stories. Then their banker has to agree to believe in it in order for them to get a loan, and all their other advisors have to be able to believe in it in order to encourage them to actually move forward and do the deal. So, if the numbers aren't clean, the deal is likely already dead. If you rely too much on adjustments, normalization, add backs without supporting documentation, then you're just wasting everybody's time. So what do I mean? Well, I just gave the example of, someone who says they spend 20,000 a year on personal travel and they've hidden that within the expenses of the business. When somebody gets into due diligence on your business, they're going to then say to you, produce all the receipts, specifically the $20,000 worth of receipts for each year that you've claimed this add back should exist. And this is where things fall apart, right? So a lot of the times in the normal process, you have some kind of broker package or whatever that's put in front of a buyer. I coach buyers to just accept a lot of these things that we only really want to spend time verifying them once we realize we can come up with a reasonable offer or deal with the seller. So the buyer may make you an offer based on what you've told them, and then in due diligence, if you come to an arrangement, then the buyer is going to say, "All these ad backs you've put on here, prove them to me." And if you can't produce detailed results, like here's the money we spent on the hotel, here's the money we spent on the flight, here's the money we spent on this, here's the money we spent on that, then the thing's just going to fall apart. Right? Like, I sometimes think that sellers believe it's just some kind of, business broker magic that, makes profit appear, and, but the thing that drives me insane is the business brokers that do this, right? Like we work with buyers here, we help them analyze deals and show them what kind of offers can be made on a particular business. And it blows me away when we see these broker packages, which will have these ad backs, and they're all round figures because they're all just guesses pulled out of the air, right? As to personal discretionary spending that's within the expenses of the business. And what's frustrating to me is that I know that these brokers are just so eager to get a listing and so eager to put a price on it that will impress the seller that they agree to these sort of made up things. And all it is a recipe for wasting everybody's time. It wastes the seller's time, it wastes the broker's time, it wastes the buyer's time. Like, level up, guys. Come on. All right. So, number 4, item number 4, biggest mistakes people make when trying to sell a business is running a you dependent business. So buyers always have 2 questions. The first question is, what is the cash flow? So that's indicated by the records, and there could be add backs and adjustments, right? But if they're properly documented or whatever, you can demonstrate the validity of those numbers. So the numbers are going to demonstrate the cash flow. The number 2 question is always, will the cash flow continue under my stewardship? And that's when we get into the whole concept of transferability of business value. And so then the buyer is going to want to know, like, are there systems and processes in place? Like, who deals with the owner? Are the top customers dealing directly with the owner? Will those people want to do business with me as the new owner, right? These are all the concerns that people have. So this is where systematization, documentation, delegations, like all of this kind of stuff, the operating procedures of the business um, have to be in place, and they have to be represented in a fashion that can be demonstrated to people. So you have to be able to show someone, here's how our process works, here's how it's all laid out. And it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be in a big book that or a binder or something like that. But if you can go into a shared folder on a computer and show a spreadsheet which breaks down different processes, or you've got all the job descriptions somewhere, or you've got like a Notion database or something like that, where you can show this is how it's organized. My employees can refer to this. This is our checklist of how to put together, the final delivery of the service to our customer. Here's our checklist about how we manage a submission or an inquiry for a quote. Like, here's our process on how we price the roofing job. Here's the worksheet that is based upon that process that makes sure that we gather all the proper information when we go out to do measurements at somebody's house. Like, this is the kind of stuff people want to see at this stage. And if all that stuff or a good chunk of it is in your head, then you can't really show it to anybody, can you? Right. So, um, you want to prove or be able to demonstrate that this is really a business that other people can operate, and it's not just your high income job that only you can do. Um, and if you cannot demonstrate these things, it means that if you are able to come up with a deal, usually with somebody who's got a great deal of confidence in themselves and their ability to learn what you know, you can expect to be tied into a very long transition period, sometimes going into years, where you will have to stay and work with the buyer so that the buyer can fully absorb all of the stuff that you know. So, learning through folklore and osmosis, as we sometimes refer to it, or that the buyer will be able to, in fact, sit down and write all of these things that you haven't done, right? And because so much is geared or dependent upon the ability to transfer this knowledge, you can expect this deal, if you're able to pull it off, to be very highly geared towards a seller financing note, earnouts, royalties, payments tied to the performance of the business after the transaction, which is generally not what sellers want. Sellers want to sell the business, get a check, and go off into the sunset. If you cannot demonstrate how the business can be run without you, that is not the kind of exit that you are going to be lined up for. And this leads us in to number 3. So, item number 3 on the list is waiting too long to prepare. So, what related to item number 2, running a U or number 4, running a U dependent business. If you wait too long to prepare this stuff, what ends up happening is you then don't want to do the work because you get to the point where you're all tired out. And that's when people end up like closing down the business instead of trying to sell it. So, item number three, waiting too long to prepare. This connects the first two things, right? If you decide today, I want to sell my business, I better get my books in order. Like you've got at least 2 years of clean books to prepare before anyone will look at your business and think that you've got clean books. If you if you decide today, I want to sell my business, I better get everything written down. Well, you've got potentially a year-long project ahead of you, and then you have to show that the processes and systems that you've now documented are actually working, right? So my advice to people is always start thinking about the exit of the business as soon as you reach this key point. So I'm not going to tell you to think about the exit when you start, because I don't think that's realistic, because so many businesses that start, if it's a new startup, fail, right? Or they never reach a point of economic momentum where they reach escape velocity and are really able to take off. And some of them just kind of stumble along for a while, and then we choose to kill them because they have problems. But when you get to the point where you are able to pay yourself a fair market wage for your full-time work in the business, and then there's more money, like, even as little as an extra 20, 30, 40,000 a year. So if running your kind of business is like $100,000 job and you're able to produce 140,000 out of your business, now is the point where you have to start to take this stuff seriously and look at the having proper books, having good systems in place to demonstrate the transferability of your business. Why? Why that person could be in their 20s or 30s when they reach that point. So why do we want to be so prepared to sell our business so early? Easy. The top 5 reasons that people put up a business for sale are burnout, boredom, and fatigue, divorce, poor health, the need to relocate, and finally retirement. Retirement's the only one you plan for. Whenever people think about selling a business, they're always focused on retirement because that's the one that they have any degree of control over, because they can kind of create a plan. You know, I'm whatever age I am, I guess I'm going to retire at 65. Oh, I got 20 years. I don't have to worry about it. But the reality is, those other four things happen to people all the time in their life with no planning or preparation at all. So if you want to be prepared for the vast majority of reasons why a business needs to be sold, then start preparing earlier. So that's number three, waiting too long to prepare. Item number two on our list of the top mistakes people make. So there's the big number two with our snowman. Um, Overpricing the business. It's like, um, so unrealistic prices discourages real buyers and creates a stale listing. You will potentially meet people that want to make an offer on your business. They might even make a full price offer, but then later when they talk to their banker who shows them the deal isn't cash flow, your deal will fall apart. And you know, asking too much money, basically you scare off the proper buyer, the one you want to meet, the one who has a little bit of knowledge about your industry. They've watched videos like mine, they've read articles, they've talked with ChatGPT about how to buy a business. They have an idea of what the multiple trends are for valuation in your industry. And if you put something out there that's nuts, or you put something out there that's unrealistic in the way that it's based upon a sudden spike in earnings in the most recent year, and you put all of your valuation on that, you just chase away the good buyers who are the ones that are actually prepared to make a deal. Um, let's look at it this way. When you have made the decision that you want to sell your business, when you actually reach that point in your heart and your mind, what does that mean? It means that there are circumstances or forces that are making you realize that you should not be spending your time there anymore. Whether this is for burnout, boredom, and fatigue, divorce, poor health, and need to relocate, or retirement, you now have some kind of thing applying pressure on you that is saying, now's the time to get out, time to go do something else. Well, if you if you overprice the business, you're going to take longer to sell. I think we can agree that makes sense, right? Um, that pressure is probably going to grow over time. So I always tell people when something happens in your life and makes you want to sell your business, it means that now you are in a race to sell the business while your numbers still look good before that pressure creates the circumstances in your business which cause performance to decline, whether it's sales or profitability. Because as soon as that pressure causes the performance to decline and the performance gets recorded in financial statements, now you got a downtrend. Now you're fighting this wave of suspicion and fear on the part of buyers about doing a deal with you. So the moment the decision is made, I need to sell, you now need to move quickly. I I've actually used the liquidation word, with some people. Like now that you made the decision, you need to get a deal happening quickly before these factors and forces cause things to sour for the business. Like so often the culture of a business and the way people are behaving in a business is driven entirely by the personal force of the owner. And when the owner starts to check out and just doesn't care as much and doesn't want to, return customer phone calls and doesn't want to like fix that light bulb that's burned out and all that kind of stuff, these attitudes spread to employees, and then that affects the way that they treat customers. And then the whole thing just starts to erode very slowly. But again, as soon as this erosion shows up in the numbers and gets recorded, now you've got a problem. So, overpricing the business, a huge mistake that people make when trying to sell. Um, the wisest sellers that I've met, where we have done our most probable selling price evaluations, um, we often will advise someone, like if the MPSP is 379,000 or, whatever, we might say to somebody, oh, well, maybe ask 399, right? Give yourself some negotiating room. We've had some people where we've told them the business will likely sell for 379. They've asked 379. They said, no, no, we'll ask that amount. And hopefully we get more than one buyer. And that will give us options if something should happen to one of the buyers, right? Because they're wanting to move with purpose and get the deal done, right? And they are usually people who realize that the value of the business is tied to the performance of the business and the transferability of the business, which are some of the things I've already talked about, and not that they're trying to ask for some aspirational price. Like, I want $1 million because I need $1 million to retire. That's never a recipe for success. All right, let's move along here to the number one thing. Um, and then just a final point about overpricing the business. When you made the decision to sell, time is not on your side. And this is a big problem people make because they think that if they have a good performing profitable business, that time is on their side, that they can continue to earn money and have continued growth, etc. In my experience, those kinds of positive outcomes are driven by the attitude of the owner. When you decide to sell, that attitude often is changing because of that pressure. So, number one, number one biggest mistake people make when trying to sell a small business is confusing the transaction price with the enterprise value. And this is one that I've talked about a little bit before over the course of the past year. But here's the issue is that the cash flow you have for sale has a certain value. That's what the buyer is going to be willing to invest to get the business with everything required to operate. And so a lot of the times in the world of small business, we do what are called asset sales, which means that the seller sells parts of the business, like the fixed assets, equipment, machinery, name, etc., to the buyer, but not all the assets required may transfer across. So there could be cash or accounts receivable, accounts payables, etc., that the seller may wind up on their own, requiring the buyer to put in their own operating capital. There could also be a scenario where there's been deferred reinvestment into capital items, fixed assets. So if all of your trucks are 10 years old and the buyer sees that they're going to have to buy some new trucks in short order after buying your business, then that again is going to affect the value that they're willing to make because they understand that if I buy the business from you and then I have to make another investment, that other investment isn't going to increase the cash flow. it's still all this money that has to be laid out for that one cash flow. And so we will have conversations often with sellers where we will show them this is the value of the cash flow you built. And now this is what you're going to receive on closing day because of all these other factors. And this, you just have to go onto Twitter and look at some of the conversations in the small business space to see how many deals fall apart when the buyer and seller agree on the value of the business and then later can't come to an agreement on any kind of working capital adjustment because the sellers refuse to admit that they've built a machine, a business that requires some degree of working capital to function, and they think that they can sell the business for the value that has been arrived at for the enterprise value, but they also somehow get to keep all the operating capital. They want to pull it out, and they'll justify it in 101 different ways, like that's my money. Those receivables are for sales I already delivered on. It belongs to me, without taking any responsibility for the fact that they built a business by accumulating a group of clients that all rely upon them having 30 to 60 days to pay their invoices. That means that that business is effectively a bank financing the activities of the customers, and we have a customer group that relies upon that because of their own operating capital position. You can't sell that business and say suddenly, "Oh, you can just change everything." You know, you can require everyone to pay with a credit card after they've enjoyed getting 60 days from us for the last 15 years. Doesn't work, right? So that's why it's important for sellers to understand that enterprise value and transaction price are not the same thing. And it's important for sellers to work with somebody who is going to help value their business and prepare it for sale, who understands these concepts and adequately prepares them for what the deal is really going to look like. Again, this is a place where working with the wrong business broker can mess things up by inflating expectations. And believe it or not, there's tons of business brokers out there who really don't have any understanding of operating capital. They just they follow some rote formula that they were taught about how to do add backs. They find an SDE cash flow, they multiply it by some number that they find in a book, and they present that for sale. And then at the end, when it comes time for a transaction, they throw their hands in the air and they just say, "Oh, like if you're serious about buying a business, this is what it takes. You got to get your own operating capital." And they try to bully their way through these conversations with buyers, and it just doesn't work anymore. Why doesn't it work anymore? Like, it probably worked in the early 2000s or before. It doesn't work anymore because of the internet, because people have taken business buyer advantage. That's why it doesn't work anymore. Anyway, uh, selling a business is hard and tricky, and it requires a great deal of preparation. My advice to people is that if you have a good, profitable business, if you reach that benchmark I talked about earlier, if your business is paying you a fair market wage for what you would be paid to run that business if you were working for strangers, right? If you can pull that amount of money out and then there's more, then it's time to start thinking about what selling the business could look like, because having an idea of what the business is worth is going to inform your ability to make other decisions inside the business. Does it make sense to buy the new machine? Does it make sense to replace the trucks? Does it make sense to expand into the new market, etc.? And so I encourage people to do that earlier, not later, right? If you've decided to sell your business and you want help selling it, we do that for people. But I'll tell you, we can give a lot more and more comprehensive help to people who come to us and say, "I'm thinking of selling in 15 or 20 years or even 10 years," than people who say, "I want to sell now." Because we can then point out a bunch of things to them, but if they don't have the time left, they can't really make a whole lot of changes. And then it becomes about managing their expectation. I have to teach them, like, because of these problems, this is what your deal is going to look like. And the buyer probably can't get a loan. The buyer is going to require you to do this and that. And the buyer is going to ask for this. And when people hear these conditions about what the deal is likely going to look like, they have to make a choice. They either roll the dice and gamble that they can find a buyer who isn't as informed and doesn't really understand what they should be doing, um, or they make the decision, well, maybe I can't sell then. Maybe I'll just work 3 more years, save more, and then I'll just shut it down. Right. Which is a terrible way to end, especially if you've built something that is a valuable business. Anyway, you want to talk about it. hit us up. This is what we do. We talk to people all the time, buyers and sellers of small businesses, and we help them out with strategies, valuation, consulting on buying and selling. I've got a whole team of people that work with me, and we handle several files every week for people all over the place. And if you want to learn more about it, just come over. If you're a buyer, go to businessbuyeradvantage.com. If you're someone who owns a business that wants help with selling, go to howtosellmyownbusiness.com. There's free resources on both locations, and we'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. And with that, I'll say thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.
So, how can you learn more about buying, selling, financing, and managing small and medium sized businesses? Easy. Go over to my blog site, davidcbarnett.com, where you can learn more about me and how I work with my clients. You can learn more about my books and courses that I've prepared for you. You can find out how to subscribe to my email list, the YouTube playlists, and more. There's literally hundreds of hours of content there, all for free, and I'd love for you to be my guest. Special thanks go to Mark Willis at Lake Growth Financial, today's video sponsor. Mark helps people better manage their personal and business finances through the Bank on Yourself insurance strategy. This is something I've done personally and I've seen others use it successfully for years. Go to newbankingsolution.com to find all the interviews I've done with Mark and learn more about the advantages of these programs. While there, sign up for a free consultation to learn what this solution might look like for you.